Hey guys, what's going on? Today I'm going to be talking about week 9 at Hack Reactor, what I've been working on the last week, which if you've seen my most recent videos, which I'll link up here in the corner, you probably have kind of a general idea of what I've been doing, but I'm going to go a little bit more into detail about what exactly I've been doing on this project that I'm working on that makes it so crazy, that it's just like some wild stuff that I've never done before that's really that I think is really cool, and I want to share that with you guys. So as far as this week goes, I've been doing a lot of stuff with my my database. If you actually did click the link up there and you watched my old video, I can't remember if I mentioned this or not, but I chose to go with a Postgres database for my current project, my SDC. There's a couple reasons that I went with Postgres. One is I've never used it before, so I really wanted to get some experience with that. But there was also just some things that I thought were really interesting about it, which I mean are probably more common than I realized because of my lack of experience with SQL, well, SQL, but also just relational type databases in general, because I have a little bit more experience using non-relational databases such as MongoDB than I do relational databases. So I learned a lot over the last couple weeks using Postgres over something that I was more comfortable with, like MongoDB. So a little bit more information about my database. I wrote a script to create massive loads of fake data for this Postgres database that I built. And when I say massive loads of data, I mean like 35 million records. I wrote a script that basically generates CSV files that are full of fake data that I then seeded my database with. So actually right now it has over 35 million records in it, which is like an insane amount of data. It's pretty cool though, like that I built that myself. So there's a couple things that happen when you start to put like amounts of data like this large into a database, and some of you could probably guess it has to do with queries. So when you start writing queries and you have this many records in your database, it starts to slow down your queries substantially. And when I say slow down your queries substantially, my initial GET request when loading my application page took 35 seconds on my initial benchmark. Nobody's gonna wait 35 seconds for your page to load, and if they do, they're probably the most patient person on the planet. So I had to do something about this. The solution that I ended up coming up with was indexing. So indexing on Postgres using their graphic user interface application called pgadmin. It's actually like incredibly easy to implement. You can do it super simple with just a couple commands using their query tool that's built right into the tool. And this is really cool because you can index specific columns of your data. So this basically gives Postgres another reference column for searching for your data. So what's really cool about this may not sound like a big deal, but it is. What ended up happening was after I indexed the specific data that I needed to within my tables, I reran the exact same query to load my application page, and I brought my query time for the exact same data with the exact same quantity of data on the exact same tables down from 35 seconds to about 12 to 15 milliseconds, which if you're familiar with time, that's like an astronomical difference. Super awesome that worked out, and my data became almost instantaneously accessible even with 35 million records in the database. So this was really cool to be able to implement and to see that optimization actually take place in my application and realize how much faster it's getting. Okay, cool, so I made my queries fast. So what was the next thing I had to do? Well, the next thing I had to do was I had to learn how to use this little tool called Artillery. Artillery is a load testing tool. You can Google this or you can look it up directly at artillery.io. Their tool is incredibly awesome. Basically, you'll install the package to your application using npm or whatever your package manager is. And then after installing it, what you'll do is you'll write a configuration file, which is basically like it's kind of like a script in a sense, but it's a YAML file. What's really happening is that you're basically writing this big scenario, and it has different time durations for like how long each scenario is going to run for. So what this is doing is this is basically generating fake users by the amounts that you determine in each phase. And these users are going to pick a scenario that you define below, and they're going to start hitting your routes, whether they're get routes or post routes, and they're going to start pinging your server. So this is load testing. This is how you can find out when and where your application's weak points are, as far as like how much load can they handle before your server crashes or like starts to break down. So it was kind of tricky to figure out how to get this to work at first. There's really like a sweet spot in the numbers. If you start generating users too fast, you end up overflowing the heap, the JavaScript heap that Node.js has, as far as like memory that it's allotted to use. It's not really, you can increase the amount of memory that Node.js has access to, because Artillery runs through Node.js, and it is limited in how much memory it's allotted to use by default. You can increase this number, but it's better to just try and find an alternative way and find out what's going wrong and another way to do it. My solution was, I think that just for my setup, I was told I bumped the numbers down from 20 users per second down to 10 users per second. And I increased the time duration of the phases. So that ended up kind of being the sweet spot for me, was to have longer phases but add users slower, as to not have this massive increase of users all at once. As a very wise Stack Overflow post that I read yesterday, that the point of this is to find out where and when your server starts to break, to find that peak load, such as if you wanted to test a boat and its ability to float, and you put 10 sandbags in one at a time, you wouldn't suddenly add 100 sandbags into it, because the boat would sink probably. So I thought that was a really good analogy, and it really helped to clarify the point in what I'm doing here. So my very first night load testing was, I think, like 2 days ago, probably around 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and I pinged out at like 10 requests per second, which is almost nothing. My overall goal here is to reach 1,000, so as you can tell, that was like not even anywhere near any kind of benchmark that I was hoping for. I ended up calling it a night because I was stressed out. So the next day, I ended up reworking some of my configuration file, and this is where I kind of talked about where I was trying to find that sweet spot and how I was generating users and the scenarios and things like that. And I ended up, the highest one that I've ended up getting so far was 794 requests per second, which is great. That's like 1,000-fold, my initial test. So that's definitely great. But I'm also still not quite where I'm trying to be yet. So I'm still kind of reworking that configuration file and trying to find out some weak points and see if I can get that number up anymore. Altering the file further did cause my numbers to drop, but I'm slowly ramping the numbers up. So the last test that I ran, I got back up into like the 530 range as far as requests per second. So I'm not there yet, but I'm getting there. I still have all next week to work on the SDC. So there's still a lot of work to be done, but I'm definitely getting there. And I think that this is going to be a super cool project to add to my resume, which I'm planning on doing here pretty soon. But if you guys are interested in anything like load testing or anything like that, definitely check out Artillery.io. They have a really cool tool for doing this kind of thing. I'm also using New Relic for monitoring graphs and data as far as those requests go. As they start to ping my server, I can see like graphical outputs of it, which is pretty cool. So there's a lot of really cool tools out there for load testing, but load test your apps, guys. It's pretty cool. Even if you're not really gonna like deploy it, it's still useful to know. It's a very powerful tool, so check it out, guys. But that pretty much wraps it up for week 9. Week 10 starts Monday, so I'm looking forward to it, guys. Hope you guys have a great weekend. Till next time.